Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Funeral and Asset Protection Planning, as well as Advanced Funeral Planning. We're here tonight with attorney Eric Birch and myself, Jamie Aller, with Epilogue Planning Professionals. For those attending, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button as well as a chat button. If you have questions during the program, feel free to type a question in one of those areas, and we'll address those questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to start tonight's presentation with Attorney Birch. And Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to the presentation. My name is Eric Birch. I'm an attorney with Reuter Ware. I'm based out of Wausau, but we cover from Green Bay to Eau Claire, where we also have offices, Marshfield area, and all points north. So have car, will travel. My role is an estate planning attorney dealing with general estate planning, but with a specialty and focus in the elder law area. So I do a lot of asset protection as it relates to long-term care and nursing homes. And that is part of the presentation tonight. I am going to start with an overview of general estate planning, give us a taste of that, starting with 3 ways to transfer wealth, look at some different types of trusts as kind of an introduction to wills versus trusts, touch on asset protection as it relates to long-term care, and then Jamie will come back in with the funeral planning portion, getting into a specific type of funeral expense trust. So when I'm working with clients and we're dealing with estate planning, it really boils down to 3 ways that we can transfer wealth to the next generation. We can use beneficiary designations, we can use a will, or we can use a trust as our main vehicle and instructions to transfer our assets. In reality, we use a combination of all 3. No one way gets everything done, and so we typically combine all of them. Touching on beneficiary designations, those are the most commonly used. Most of you probably have a payable on death on your bank account or savings or checking account. Most people have some type of a beneficiary on their 401k or IRA accounts, and life insurance would be another common product where people have listed who will receive that when they have passed away. The reason these are so popular is they're very easy to do. It's simply filling out a form, putting down who you would like to be the beneficiary, and the simplicity and the lack of legal expenses tied with it makes it a popular choice. Another reason people prefer beneficiary designations are the immediate access for family members. When I'm dealing with families, one of their concerns is, how will my family have access to money to pay my debts when I'm gone? Whether it's the last expenses related to medical, whether it's utility bills, or whether it's funeral expenses. The family's concerned that the money is going to be tied up in probate, and what do we do? A common solution is folks want to name one child to receive the money, handle everything, and then follow mom or dad's wishes and distribute money to siblings or charities. Although in theory this sounds like a great setup, what happens is we don't have one person able to do that without needing help from others. What I mean by that is family members all want to have their share of the inheritance right away. If someone is spending their money, they tend not to like that. We also get into gifting issues because now one person has to make gifts to all of the siblings. So even though it may be immediate access, we're really causing some issues potentially with the family. Another drawback to beneficiary designations are dealing with beneficiaries who need to be protected. So a beneficiary who's in the middle of a divorce or bankruptcy proceeding may not want to have cash suddenly given to them. A beneficiary who has special needs might not be able to accept even a small cash gift that would normally be something that would be helpful to most of us, could cause many problems with that beneficiary's medical assistance benefits or other programs that are there to support them. So beneficiary designations, while they're great, aren't the only option for us. We also want to talk about and look at wills. So a will is a document that tells your personal representative or executor what to do. The problem is that the personal representative doesn't have any authority, and so a drawback to a will is that it has to go through probate. And that's the court proceeding where the court admits the will, appoints the personal representative. It's done as a public proceeding, so your will gets filed at the courthouse. It does take extra time. Generally, we're looking at about a year for probate, sometimes longer if you have unique or rare assets that need to be dealt with. Or sometimes you run into problems where there's real estate, but the market is slow. And so we have to wait and the probate stays open for a year or longer. On the plus side, wills are easy to set up from a legal standpoint. They're not overly complicated, or there's not a lot of creativity involved typically, and so costs are usually lower than a trust. It allows people to have control of the money in one place to make sure their bills get paid. There's no need for siblings to call each other and ask for somebody to chip in to help pay for certain expenses. It all gets taken care of in the probate proceeding. So a will does serve a purpose. Most people try to avoid them because they're concerned about probate. But sometimes probate is a good idea if we're worried that the family may have issues that they want the court overseeing the process to help things run smoothly. So for a will, the people that we need to think about having are the personal representative who is able and willing to run the probate and handle everything, and then who are the beneficiaries. We want to make sure we've named people appropriately, whether it's family or charities, and to make sure that that coordinates with any payable on death designations we might have on other assets. Most people come to see me and they initially want to know whether or not they need a trust. Well, that depends a lot on your goals and the actual strategy that you want to have. Many times we do lean towards trust because they are easier to administer than a will. There's no court involvement. There's no filing the inventory with the court, paying an inventory fee. There's no need to wait for things to be published in newspapers. It just goes smoother. Like a will, a trust allows one person to oversee everything. So there's no need to make sure multiple family members are coordinating together. That person's called the trustee. They're in charge of following the trust and administering it according to your wishes. The trust does not get filed with the court, so it's private. No one can go and see what you wrote into your trust. And because the trust is basically, I like to think of it as an instruction booklet that you create, you can have a lot of flexibility with what you want done with various assets, how children will buy each other out for the cabin or lake home, for example. And it allows you to provide protection for beneficiaries who might need it. So you can hold things in trust so it doesn't impact that beneficiary who has special needs or the child who may be going through divorce. The trusts aren't perfect though. They do have some drawbacks. There's still administration after we've passed. And so if I pass away, my trustee still needs to go through the process of examining all of the assets and doing some work with taxes and things like that. So it's not an automatic transfer like the beneficiary designation, but it's definitely not as long for a typical trust administration as a probate would be. And then there's the cost of the trust itself. Because we can have flexibility, because we're getting all of these advantages of privacy and ease, there is a cost to that. In general, the cost for the trust is equivalent to the will and probate costs that you would go through. And so really it boils down to what works best for you and your family. And again, we don't just have a trust. It's in conjunction with a will. It's in conjunction and coordinating with your beneficiary designations. And so for a trust planning, we need to have the person creating the trust. In Wisconsin, we call them the settlor. If you research trusts online, you're going to run across terms like grantor, trustor, donor. They all mean the same thing. It's the person who creates it, the person who is transferring their assets or their stuff to the trust. Then the trustee is someone who is going to be following that trust directions. You want to make sure the person's able to do that. Some people want a corporate trustee or professional trustee overseeing it. Again, there's no right or wrong. It depends on your goals. And then the beneficiaries. Every trust has to exist to benefit someone. And your beneficiaries can be individuals, charities, combinations of the two. And those trusts and beneficiaries can go on for many generations. And so as we're working with clients, in general, we're walking through what works best to accomplish your goals. And then often we get to the point where questions start coming up about, well, what about an income trust? What about a family trust? I've heard about dynasty trust or special needs trust. Trusts come in a variety of names, and the names sometimes give us clues about what the trust does, but really there is no rule for what the trust name could be. You could have the Kit Kat Milky Way Trust, and the name is there to protect the identity of the people maybe, but it gives us no clue as to what the trust does. The trust gets its function from what type it is, and that boils down to two types. Your trust is either irrevocable or revocable. The difference really is whether or not you can do away with or revoke the trust and pull the trust assets back into your name. So the trust is the owner of the property, the owner of record, it's on the deed, it would be on bank accounts. And the reason for that is a trust never passes away. And so the trust always exists, and that's why we don't need probate. Probate for wills, you'll remember, is the court process, and that's needed because the owner of the property has died, and we need somebody to be appointed to handle that property. Well, with the trust, we just need a new trustee. And so an irrevocable trust can't be revoked. Once you place assets into the name of that trust, you are doing that with the purpose of getting those assets out of your name for one reason or another. It used to be popular to do that for tax reasons. I deal more with clients who are wanting asset protection. So nursing homes cost a lot of money. Not everyone can afford or qualify for long-term care insurance. And they come to see me to say, what can we do to protect things for our children, to protect things for our grandchildren, and help us prepare to pay the cost of nursing home with the help of medical assistance. In those situations, an asset protection trust is an irrevocable trust. So the name helps us know what's going on, but it really doesn't provide the protection. The protection is because the trust is irrevocable. The person creating it, so the settlor, can't be a beneficiary of the trust. They are giving up the benefit of that property. Now, they could still have control by being trustee, but they are truly giving up and making a gift of those assets for various reasons. And with medical assistance, we need to be aware that any gift we make counts against us and has to be reported for up to 5 years. It's the 5-year look back period most people have heard about. So our planning, we want in this context to be done ahead of time as much as possible. The trusts that we create, our asset protection trust, have tax benefits the same as if you still owned the property. So if you're Googling irrevocable trust or asset protection trust, the tax treatment is different for every irrevocable trust. So that's again where we need to look at the instruction manual itself to see what's going on. And we need to remember that the assets aren't ours anymore for medical assistance purposes. And so this type of trust is usually done in conjunction with funeral planning. And the funeral planning is done at the same time because we're starting to plan for end of life. And Jamie and I have worked together with clients in planning together. She handles the funeral planning side, which she'll talk about now, and even incorporating a type of irrevocable trust that can hold the funeral policy. So I'll turn it over to her at this time.
All right, thank you, Eric. And again, thank you everyone for attending this evening. I'm honored that you've chosen to join us. My name is Jamie Aller and my company is Epilogue Planning Professionals. My job has been solely focused on helping folks like you get their ducks in a row for those final arrangements. So I help with something that affects every single person, yet it's something most people have difficulty discussing. And as my title suggests, our goal is to make this simple for you because it's so important to address this and prepare for it, not just for you, but especially for the people you love. And we never know when that time will be that they need this. So today is really the best day to get this started. None of us know how many tomorrows we have. So hopefully today will get you going and make this easier for everyone involved. So when we consider the most significant events in life that we prepare and plan for, things like getting married, the birth of children, grandchildren, education, retirement, we rarely just let these things happen without thoughtful planning. And just like other major life events, funerals require planning too. An estimated 34% of people over the age of 50 have planned a funeral in advance for themselves or someone else. We see these numbers growing each year as consumers have become more aware that this really should be done ahead of time and can be done ahead of time. When we look at results from a survey conducted, over 90% of people agree that funeral pre-planning is a good idea. So the question really isn't why should I pre-plan, but rather why wouldn't I? And the key reasons that people share with us for why they pre-plan: first, to lift the burden for their loved ones, both emotionally and financially. The second reason is to ensure things go the way that you want them to, which is really what your family wants, to honor you by carrying out your wishes. And finally, for peace of mind, knowing that you've done all you can for those that you love. And people ask, how much does a funeral cost? While the National Funeral Directors Association tells us the average cost nationally is around $7,000, this typically only covers the funeral home services and a casket or an urn. It doesn't take into account what we refer to as cash advance items. Cash advances contribute to the overall funeral expense, but these costs aren't set by a funeral home. Some of these outside items include cemetery costs, like the cost of the plot or for opening and closing of the grave, a headstone, obituary notices, the funeral meal, flower pieces for the displays, honorariums for clergy and musicians, and death certificates are some of those items. A simple cremation in our area may start around $2,000, while a traditional full-service burial funeral can reach close to $20,000. And funeral costs are typically rising on average about 4 to 5% each year. This means today's prices could be double in about 14 years, so having a plan to address this cost is important to eliminate an unexpected financial strain for someone else. And when considering what type of service will work best for you and your loved ones, we'll look at some of the basic options. And it's important to know that there really are no rules or one size fits all. When we use the term funeral, this typically refers to a formal service based on a religious or cultural traditions. The body is present in most cases, and because the body is present, funerals generally take place within a few days following death, before burial or cremation takes place. And a funeral can take place in a church, at a graveside, or at a funeral home, even in someone's home. A memorial service is typically held without the body present, and it can be scheduled days, weeks, months after the death occurs, allowing time for family to gather. And in fact, some of you may have heard about recently during this pandemic, many families have opted to delay their services as there are limitations currently to just 10 people at a time. A memorial service can be elaborate or simple and may be held just about anywhere, at a home, in a park, graveside, at a lake, park, church, or funeral home. And if you're looking for some unique ideas, I encourage you to take advantage of our free personal session that will be offered at the end of the presentation today. Just an example, one of my favorites was a gentleman I worked with, and he was a self-proclaimed sweet tooth, and he decided that his memorial service should be an ice cream social. And we even planned out for him to have signs within the area that said, "Life is short, eat dessert first." Some additional options to personalize a service include military honors for veterans, a butterfly or dove release, photo displays, a video tribute. We can raise funds for a favorite charitable organization or host a meal or reception at a favorite gathering place. We can even serve a favorite food item for the funeral meal. I worked with a couple recently who pre-planned for their favorite bakery to provide lefse for the meal gathering, which was a favorite tradition of theirs. Just a little brainstorming can result in a great idea to make your event special and personalized, and we're here to help with this. So when considering a service or gathering, it's important to remember that this is a gift for the people who will need to grieve their loss and honor your life. I hear people say, "I don't want a funeral," which is usually code for, "Please don't make a fuss over me." And that, of course, is human nature, but it's important to remember that the living need to honor loved ones who go before them. When we lose someone we love, ceremony is an important component of the healing process and a way to reconcile their loss. So funerals really are for the living. There's also an option for those who wish to just plan a very basic direct burial or cremation. Just know that anything you plan ahead of time will provide much needed direction at the time of need, and you can always add to or change your arrangements at any time. So once you have an idea of the type of arrangements would best accommodate you and your family's needs, a cost estimate can be provided, and this information is important when considering your funding options. An important question to ask is, if something happened to you tomorrow, how would your funeral expenses be paid? For some, personal savings may be the first thought, but for a longer term plan, the potential to encounter expensive long-term healthcare costs, like Eric mentioned, it does pose a risk to those savings. In addition, a surviving spouse may need to rely on savings to supplement their lost income. When we rely on other family members or friends to pay the funeral expense, there is a risk they'll overspend emotionally. And many people aren't aware that oftentimes when death occurs, those assets passed to the kids can be frozen during probate, which can mean family is left to cover the bill before those funds are available. Sometimes that can be for many months. So borrowing from family and friends could be an option. I guess, most people don't want to leave that burden to a family member. If they have to use a credit card or take out a loan, there could be interest charges for them to incur. Not too many people want to pass along that to family as a goodbye present. Another thought you might have is I have life insurance. And life insurance is a wonderful tool for passing a tax-free gift to survivors. It allows loved ones to maintain their standard of living after a death. Funeral expenses are generally due at the time of arrangements, and life insurance generally takes a couple weeks to process if all goes well. That often will leave family to cover some of those expenses out of pocket until the claim is settled. Cemetery costs are due and payable when the burial occurs. Flowers are expected to be paid the day of the service, so more and more funeral homes are asking for that to be covered the day of the funeral. By the way, in cases where a death certificate is delayed, it also delays timing of those funds, the availability of those funds. And in cases of accidental death or autopsy investigation, it is common to see weeks or even months of delay to receive death certificates. Again, for long-term planning, life insurance with cash value is considered an available asset for long-term care. In other words, just like your other savings, most policies are not protected from creditors like the nursing home. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I do run into. People think their life insurance is protected if they go into the nursing home, and that is not the case. Fortunately, there is an alternative to allow you to avoid some of the pitfalls I just mentioned. You can choose to arrange payment in advance with a specially designed funeral insurance policy held in an irrevocable funeral trust. Once you've determined what your funeral needs are, a policy is taken out for the amount needed to cover those anticipated expenses. The great news is everyone qualifies, and the death benefit grows over time, which helps to offset price increases. Then at the time of death, your funeral provider can access the death benefit directly. A feature of this policy that offers that protection that other policies don't is the irrevocable trust designation. That means that the policy remains intact and available only for the payment of these final expenses. As I once heard someone put it, it can't be accessed by creditors, predators, or nursing homes, and that is one of the nice features of the trust. So to summarize, why should you take care of the expenses ahead of time? Why not let someone else worry about this? Maybe you're thinking, I've got plenty of money for my kids to handle it. Well, first, you're giving yourself the option to make customized payments on your terms. When a funeral isn't funded ahead of time, the full amount is due and payable, usually in a few days. And as I mentioned, many funeral homes want payment the day of the service. It can really add stress to an already stressful time for a family. So funding in advance relieves a huge burden. Those expenses are immediately paid at the time of death without involving family interaction, and the funeral home files the claim and receives payment directly. And if there are any unused funds, those go back to your estate. Another reason to fund ahead is to ensure that funds will be available for these expenses no matter what may happen as the end of life approaches. Many families encounter medical issues that require long-term care, and having that funeral pre-funded with a policy in an irrevocable trust is safe. And finally, of course, peace of mind to not have to worry about how your family will cope with all those decisions that have to be made quickly. You're getting everything in order for them. What I assist people with is 3 simple steps to achieving that peace of mind. First, we organize the documents that will be necessary, just like the other important documents like power of attorney, wills, and trusts. Your funeral plan should include some important documents prepared ahead of time. In addition to mapping out your detailed final wishes, we can include an authorization for final disposition, which is a legal document that ensures someone is in charge of executing all aspects of your final arrangements. Certainly having some of those things mapped out in a plan will help, but this is kind of the extra protection and make sure that if there are any things left to decide, that there is a point person Example, who gets the urn? When will the service take place? Who's allowed to attend that family final viewing time? Appointing someone in charge of what happens to your body and with your final arrangements. It's not legally addressed with those other documents, as I mentioned, so it can really be an important peacekeeper document for those families that have the potential for disagreement. And let's face it, many families with rifts never thought they'd be that family before the rift occurred. So we also create an outline for the obituary and death certificates for your file. And lastly, your family will never have to call an insurance company to start a claim or worry about juggling funds. It'll all be taken care of for them. So planning ahead is really a gift for those that you'll leave behind. As I'm sure nearly everyone here can attest, when someone we love dies, emotions are raw and tensions exist even in the best of relationships. The potential for disagreements is far less when those key details are mapped out for your family and paid for. They'll be able to focus on their healing process, and they'll be confident knowing they're following your wishes. And you can achieve peace of mind knowing that you've done all you can to make a tough transitional period a little easier for them. So we'll guide you through that 3-step process. So where do you go from here? Well, hopefully you'll be inspired to take some action. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to put some of these things you've learned today to work for you and your family. Soon you'll receive a follow-up email from us. You'll have a link and see my picture and calendar with available dates and times where you can schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting. For those of you who may want to involve other family members in a discussion, you can extend a meeting invitation to them as well. This technology allows us to bring everyone together from the comfort and safety of home. And the meeting takes about an hour, and there's no cost or obligation. Customers often tell me it's an easy and pleasant experience. So I look forward to helping you and anyone else that you would like to share this with. If you should like to schedule a Zoom or phone consultation with Attorney Birch, please feel free to call or email him. His information is up on the screen and will also be forwarded to you in our follow-up email. And I just want to, before we sign off, check and see if we have any questions from the group, from the participants. I don't see any. Eric, I think we covered everything. So with that, I just want to thank everyone. I just want to thank everyone for attending. And again, if we can assist you further, please reach out to us and expect that follow-up email here in the near future. So everyone stays safe.